Today in Roach Reflections, I want to talk about finesse in roach fishing. I'm talking about float fishing, pole fishing, rather than ledgering or fishing a feeder. And anyone who's fished for many years for roach will know that there are contradictions with roach just as any other fish. There are times when you fish very, very fine 22 hooks, very fine lines, 0.08 millimeters, just to get a bite, and you think, oh, I'll go a bit stronger line, 0.10, a size 20, and you don't get bites. And then you've got the complete opposite. You fish with a great big lump of flake on a size 10 or a size 8, and the roach plunge the float down with incredible abandon, dragging the float along the top, and you think, well, if they're so easy to catch, why are they so fussy at other times? There's no easy answer to this, but there is an important point in that experimenting with how you're fishing, even during a session, can make all the difference. Moving shot around, trying different hooks, different baits, hooks tied to different lines are going to make a difference. For roach fishing, I'm a great fan of fine wire hooks. The ones I've been using for quite a while, the Drennan Silverfish Barbless Match, are a fine wire, quite strong. The bend on them, the size of the hook is, I would say, bigger than what I would expect for the sizes. So a size 20 is more like an old 18 or even bigger on the bend. The 16s are close to the size of some 14s, and the 14s are more like 12s, but they are a fine wire, a sharp hook. Whether they'll be replaced by the new Drennan Acolyte hooks, which have got a Teflon coating, I don't know. And when it comes to Teflon coatings, supposedly the hooks keep their points longer and go in better. I've tried some Teflon coated hooks from Preston and they keep their points very well, but I seem to lose an awful lot of fish on them. So whether they slip in well and slip out well, I'm not quite sure, but can't quite make my mind up about them. Don't seem to get as good a hook hold as I would hope for. And these are all barbless hooks. So is there a secret to all this? I think we go back to the basics of match the hook to the bait and then try and achieve the presentation that you want with that bait. There's no point trying to fish a big pinch of flake on a size 18 or a 20 and at the same time trying to fish for roach with double maggots on a 12, a great big thick hook like Camerson, trying to think what it's called, animal hooks or super specialists and things like that people use for barbel and chub. For roach, I think you're taking away the finesse that you really need. People say, well, I've caught big roach on these hooks. Yeah, maybe, but do they work as well as the finer ones? And I don't think they do. The added weight of the hooks, the thicker wire, makes a difference to bait presentation. When a roach sucks up that bait, it doesn't move as easily, it's heavier, and so the fine wire is going to help. And some of the hooks I've used in the past, I think I've said before about the Mustad Sproats, the 39082s, where they were described as 3x fine wire. That means 3 gauges of wire finer than a standard hook. So they're not just a little bit fine, they're very, very fine. And they were the wire's a little bit soft, but you don't straighten out on them. And I was always incredibly confident with those hooks, and I've still got enough to use, that if I hooked a big roach on one of those 12 Sproats, and funnily enough the 10s and the 14s were no good, or the 16s, the 12 was just the perfect hook for that finesse for fishing with a big punch or a small pinch of flake. But I was totally confident of landing the roach. So I've never lost roach on those hooks. I've lost one or two, but not very many. a barbed hook with a long point, long sharp point, but they did work. The little hooks, you might think, well, how can I get big fish out on little hooks? But I've had a number of 2 pound roach on size 20s, and these are the old 20s, not the newfangled big ones, what we call the big 20s. On the old Drennan carbon match, the original ones without the beak points and so on, and even one or two on used to catch one or two big roach, used to fish casters on a Drennan caster hook, which were a carbon, what they call a carbon hook, a blued 22 on a caster. That was on the pole, and that finesse did make a difference. Now and again I got caught out by that finesse. I was fishing a match with those same hooks on the upper Stour, and suddenly found I had some good sized bream in the swim during the match, fishing the pole. I got one out of about 3 pounds, lost one maybe 4 pounds, and at that point I decided that maybe a 22 very fine wire hook wasn't the right hook for fishing double caster, and switched to an 18 and got another bream plus quite a lot of roach up to a pound, and won the match. But I definitely needed both bream to do that. So I'd think about the hooks you're using for roach fishing. Certainly for hempen tears, fishing for roach, I think you want as fine a wire hook as you can find, and fine lines to go with it. In the summer I'm fishing in fairly clear water, maybe fishing down on the bottom, maybe fishing up in the water, and I'm normally fishing 0.08 or 0.09. Now I will say that the Preston Innovations Reflow power line is a lovely line, but it does tend to be understated on the diameters. I know fish don't use micrometers, they can't use. I've got a vernier gauge, which is a good one, and that's not as accurate as the most accurate line testing rigs that are around there that can go down to thousandths of a millimeter with an accurate pressure. With the vernier gauge it's just sort of push it and not too tight. But those reflow line tends to be about, for the fine ones, the 0.08, 0.09, about 0.01 millimeters understated. So if it says 0.09, it's 0.10. But other lines are actually accurate. They will be, if they're 0.08, they are 0.08, and you need to know the difference. So if you treat the 0.09 as a 0.10, getting a bit technical now, you know where you're at. So get to know the lines that you're using. The same thing comes with a finesse with reel lines. Gary Etheridge, who I may have mentioned occasionally in my Waggler series, very good Waggler angler who fishes incredibly fine. I don't know if he still does it, but I know 30 years ago he experimented successfully with fishing with 1 pound Maxima mainline for Waggler fishing. It needs a very, very gentle strike, otherwise you'll crack your floats off, and you can't use a very heavy float, probably only 3 or 4 BB. And he was coupling that with 8-ounce hook lengths and size 24 and 26 hooks for roach, not big roach, but roach fishing generally, and doing very well, as I found to my cost in a match when he weighed in over 6 pounds to win this Drennan Super League match, and I had about 3 pounds. I was fishing 1.5 pound Maxima mainline and an ordinary a fine wire 22, and on that very hard day on the Bristol Avon, that was not fine enough. It was only after the match, then when he revealed exactly what he was up to, that I found out the difference. And he was fishing tiny. Having a 1 pound mainline gave him the opportunity to fish with very small shots down the line above the hook length. He can put on sort of number 11s or 12s down the line. Once you start to get a thicker mainline, say 2 pound Maxima, you'll struggle to get those really tiny shot onto the line. And that was the presentation he was trying to really fine tune that presentation with those very, very small shot. It's something I want to try again this year. I've got some £1 Maxima. I've got £1.5. Whether I use it as a full-blown mainline, I don't know. Jim Baxter, whose fantastic book, The Rising Antenna, is now back in print. If you go to contradictions.com, you'll find it. A reprint version is there now. Has suggested a compromise, which is to set a waggler fishing with, say, £2 Maxima, and then just below the float you then have a what they would call a cast, really. So a length of, say, 5 foot of much finer line of, say, £1 Maxima, and then the hook length going off that, which might be 0.08. So you get that very fine line between the float and the hook, including the hook length as well, and that gives you that better presentation in that case. But you've still got the strength of the £2 Maxima to the float, so when you strike and you're hitting the float, you've got that little bit more safety margin. I hope I've got you thinking about finesse and fishing. At the moment it's the middle of the close season. I'm not going to be on the rivers for another however many weeks it is, 7 weeks or so. I've been tying hooks like crazy, sorting out all the other things, but it won't be long before we can get on the rivers again and do some proper fishing. In the meantime, I will try and get on some still waters and find some more good fish. Until then, it's goodbye for now.